Revere TV, can you confirm that you can hear me? Good evening. Welcome to the March 12th, 2025 meeting of the City of Revere Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board. My name is Joe Gravelisi. I serve on behalf of Mayor Keefe as the chair of the board. This is our regularly scheduled monthly meeting. So we will begin with attendance. So I do know that our vice chair, Claire Anzarillo, mentioned that she was unable to make it today. So we'll go through the rest of the membership. Anayo Soki? Here. Okay. Here. And Lori Manzo?
Here.
Okay. Layla Pietri?
Here.
And Dean Harris?
Here.
And Matt Wolfer?
Here.
And then I don't see Deb Frank, so I'll note that, although I know that she's often commuting at this time and joins us remotely. So we've got the remote access there, and that's the case if anyone were to wish to participate remotely as well. So with that, we will go right into our agenda, as we have a pretty good number of updates this month. So we'll start with the treasurer's update.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. The current balance of the Affordable Housing Trust Committee, as told to me by the Assistant Budget Director, Asute Newton, is $677,721.73. 100,000 rather, 677, 100,000, 720,000, 21,073 cents. Sorry for the error.
Thank you. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, moving forward, we're going to go to subcommittee reports. And so this one I'm pretty excited about. So since the last meeting, we had an opportunity to form two subcommittees and really start to dive into a couple things that we really want to accomplish in 2025. One related to kind of a big picture conversation on fundraising, and one related to homeownership projects. To take what we did last year, which was sort of subsidize this condo project to increase affordability, and see how can we build off of that, right? How can we find additional homeownership opportunities? So I'm going to have us report out on those committee conversations, and then also schedule the next one. And I'm actually going to start with Matt, because Matt was kind enough to send a really detailed overview of some of the things, not only that we discussed on our homeownership subcommittee, but then some of what he's researched since then. So Matt, I'm going to kick it to you to report out on that subcommittee.
Cool. Yeah. We'll start with just quick highlights from the meeting. So, we had Claire, Dean, Joe, myself there. Just talked about the intent of these meetings really being a place to workshop ideas and figuring out how to try to create affordable home ownership opportunities. One of the main things we kicked off in this first meeting was just kind of getting a list together of the world of investable options. Like what are the different things that we can do? We've got a list of 5 things right now, and probably this list grows over time as we continue to work on it. But those 5 items were, the first was tax title properties RFP. So we spent a lot of time talking about that one, but just helping evaluate bids on that as they come in. B was working with Habitat or similar nonprofits to help fund projects. So, that's something that maybe is a little bit more difficult for us to go out and source opportunities and be proactive about, but definitely something we're going to want to participate in when those opportunities show up and kind of come in direct to us. The third item, down payment assistance, again, something we've already done and spent a lot of time talking about. And kind of the two new things that we had follow-ups on. The first was, thinking about incentives for ADU or in-law conversions. And that was actually one of the follow-ups of the meeting, was Joe was chasing that down with Tom to kind of figure out what even can we do there? Do we know if other housing trust funds have done something similar? And just what would that look like? But the basic idea is, can we figure out a way to properly incentivize the development of ADUs? And that might be, like offering a $20,000 grant for someone who wants to convert a portion of their house to an ADU, that fit certain standards. And obviously, we'd have to at least ensure that, at the market rate rent that it would rent at, it would be like a form of naturally occurring affordable housing. And the second one that required some follow-up, and the one that we're really kind of focusing on, fleshing out right now, is looking into market rate housing conversion. And we kind of talked about it in two flavors. The first flavor being, the trust fund direct investing in 2 to 4 family properties and converting them into condos. So, really doing everything, completing the purchase, renovation, and sale in-house, putting it all on our balance sheet. The opportunities with doing it that way are obviously, we have a bigger impact if we're coming in and doing this because we're able to take a building and deed restrict every single one of the units. It's potentially a more efficient use of capital than working with private developers because we don't have to, bake the 15 to 20% profit that, an investor is going to expect on a condo conversion project. And we have a lot of control over project location and renovation outcomes, which is like kind of an important thread that we'll get back to after. And the risks on that strategy are, obviously it's significantly more involved operationally. It'd be a big time and resource commitment from this board to run a program like that. Another risk is, versus working with a private developer, we'd have to rely on our own project underwriting rather than relying on someone else's expertise. So, there's the risk we pay too much money for the property up front. There's the risk we under budget on the renovation. There's the risk we overassume what we can sell the properties for on the back end, and it can just end up costing us more than expected. And obviously, it's more capital intensive, and that's probably the biggest hurdle for us right now is, realistically, we don't know exactly what the dollar figure is, but it's, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million to $1.2 million, and that would obviously be difficult for us to fund today. And then option B is, instead of trying to do the whole process A to Z ourselves, just working with private investors and developers, offering some form of grant or subsidy to influence people who are already planning to do like a 2 to 4 family condo conversion to sell one of the units as deed restricted affordable. And, benefits of doing it this way, we get to benefit from their experience. We don't have that kind of underwriting risk. It wouldn't be management intensive. It would require less capital per project. So, instead of having to fund $1.2 million and maybe selling those units for $800,000 to $900,000 on the back end, and that would really be our cost of doing the full funded, like us managing the project. Instead of doing that, we would just, whatever that one unit delta is between what a unit could be sold market versus what a private investor would have to sell it for affordable, like whatever it is, $110,000, $120,000, that's all we'd be funding. We would just be kind of funding that gap to incentivize the creation of an affordable unit. And yeah, I guess last kind of opportunity to think about for that one is, there's probably some benefit to doing it this way because it lets us kind of sprinkle affordable units in where, there's mostly market rate housing. So, we're kind of integrating affordable units into the housing stock in a little bit more of an organic way. So I think that's kind of the one true upside to doing it this way versus, just doing an entire building. And obviously the risk is less control over locations and project outcomes. So with the option A, we have the benefit of making incremental decisions that have knock-on effects, like picking properties that, it's on a main thorough way, and it's kind of like the last eyesore left that really brings down the feeling and, you know, creates a sense of distress in a neighborhood or a square that otherwise like shouldn't have it, and we can be the ones who come in and like really change that. And same thing on the renovation, like, you know, we can make decisions like planting mature trees to really bring up the look and feel of a neighborhood and really improve it, whereas, you know, a private developer who's operating on a profit probably isn't gonna do those kinds of things. And I'll try and wrap quick. I know I'm starting to drone, but the follow-ups to this, so right now we're doing market research. We've built out a property scorecard. It's basically like a project level P&L to model out what that like first option looks like. And the goal between now and the next subcommittee meeting is to like get 5 to 10 real properties, either stuff that's actively listed or stuff that's recently sold, and to underwrite them so we could really intimately understand what these costs look like. Is there more benefit doing 2-bedroom units versus 3-bedroom units, doing 2 families versus 4 families? Like, where do we kind of get the most bang for our buck and the most leverage on the capital we're spending? And then kind of phase 2, after, you know, presenting those findings to the homeownership subcommittee, is going to be the next step, which is really working in the differences in cost build between option A and option B, because I think the other part of, you know, we know private developers are going to need to take a 15 to 20% profit, but, you know, there's other realities on the cost side we have to contend with. Our project probably takes longer than a private developer, so we're going to have significantly higher carry costs. We're going to be paying insurance, taxes, landscaping, et cetera, while we hold the property. And most likely our kind of structure of prevailing wages that we would have to pay versus what, you know, maybe a private contractor can do is going to be a cost delta too. If we were doing this, we'd probably have to hire like a really high quality GC who can handle the project A to Z. And so, you know, that's another 10% fee that maybe, depending on the investor we're working with, isn't part of their cost stack. So getting really sharp on the differences in cost between those two strategies to really understand what that delta is. Is it the full 15 to 20% profit, or is it more like a 5 to 10% risk premium for us not having to take that like underwriting risk, which feels a lot more reasonable. And then also working in what we don't have in the model right now, which is just outcomes based on affordability guidelines, like what the actual affordable sale prices of these units would look like versus market. And end goal being, you know, we're coming here in April and are really able to lay the entire thing out and answer all the questions, like how much capital does, you know, a direct investment require per project, how much for the grant program, what are the average typical project level economics look like, all of that. And just 3 calls to action, just a few questions for this board to think about before we get that far. First one being just thinking about how to value like having that control over the project outcome and renovation scopes. Second one being how we want to think about environmental issues. So that's another thing we can have an impact on here. Like we could decide we want to go out of our way to buy units that haven't had lead-based paint remediation and do that remediation, you know. Obviously that's gonna add to the cost, but it's something we can do, or we can do the opposite and avoid it completely, knowing we're gonna have cheaper renovations and stretch our capital further. And the last thing we wanna think about, and this is probably for the fundraising committee, is like how big of a hurdle is really the larger capital stack required to do the option A, where we're balance sheeting the properties, you know, like is that actually a hurdle, or is that actually a good thing? Like, is this kind of a program which could be really compelling, actually something that could help us, you know, work with the city, the state, or other sources to fundraise?
Thank you for all that. That was terrific. And I'm not sure if you sent the notes that you had in advance to just me or to everybody, but I'm going to make sure they get to everybody.
Yeah, I'll send them
Just so
around.
that way they can, basically, it's what he just talked about. So a chance to review that. A few things that come to mind for me, and then I'll open it up to everyone's thoughts. You know, when I think about your calls to action, I value the control highly. You know, I think that that's something that in an ideal world, would be really important for us, to be able to look at locations, neighborhoods, transit access, school access, different types of issues that relate to, where we'd want to promote affordability. So I think that's important, but then to flip it over to number 3, I think the stack is a big hurdle, right? And so that's why I tend to defer to the idea right now mentally, if I were to kind of think about what I would urge or consider, it would be to kind of try to set up a grant program for private developers doing like a condo conversion or doing a purchase of a 2 to 4 family home. I like what you said about thinking about some of the environmental issues. I think that's maybe a little outside of our scope in terms of focusing on that as being a priority, but I think it's worth thinking about moving forward. I think that when I personally, and I want to applaud you for the research you've already done and look forward to, and I'm sure we'd all like to help with that, continuing to research some of this moving forward. When I kind of zoom out and look at the big picture of some of the things that we have moving, I think that, so the RFP process, which Tom's not here, but I'll provide some updates on that, will give us an opportunity, I think, to see some new builds come on board. Now, they won't be ones that we manage, they won't be ones that we own and make money back from, but they will be opportunities to kind of see new construction happen, which I think is valuable through a combination of affordable and market rate. And then I also know that, I should be able to, so next month, Laura Christopher from Mass Development comes back from maternity leave. She's the one who I had some of the conversations with about the community land trust effort. And once she's back, I'm gonna have her come and collaborate with us again and kind of pick up on where that is, where we might get involved. I think, and this is gonna tie into some of the research I did on my role in the fundraising committee too. It is true that most of the best kind of fundraising options that exist for this type of work require a 501c3 structure that we don't have, but that like a land trust entity might have. And that type of work might work better as a collaborative effort, with a land trust, unless and until we move to a point where we have like an inclusionary zoning ordinance or Community Preservation Act or some sort of larger like sustainable funding source. So I want to, do the research. I don't want to speed ahead. I want to make sure that we're being thoughtful and deliberate. But I think looking at like the whole scope of what we have, we're working on, looking at that sort of subsidy piece of it, I think is really valuable and something that could be a really good idea. I wasn't able to find a lot of similar examples of like this type of program specifically, although I was able to find, Salem and a few other affordable housing trust boards. Obviously, what they often do, instead of kind of doing what we've done, where we have more limited resources, so we create like a targeted program and do it that way. There are a few trusts that have, I think Peabody is one, that like they'll put out a round of funding and they'll say, we're making $1 million available, which, we generally don't have, right? And we're gonna request applications from those that are interested in doing affordable housing development or projects or something over a certain window, and we'll review them based on certain criteria. And that has included subsidizing like market rate, small scale projects of like 2 to 4 families, something like that, of including affordability as part of it. So there's some precedent for trusts doing something like that. I think part of the research that we have to do is kind of what that number looks like. I know we talked about 150,000 in the subcommittee meeting. I think that number is aligned with, you kind of look at the delta for that Northern Strand Salem Street condo project that we did, the sort of delta between the market rate and affordable price, that would cover that. And then I also looked at some other similar projects where there was affordable units and market rate units, and that would work. I think where we need to make sure we're double, triple checking everything is that there's additional costs associated with this type of project that are different from the delta between like a market rate and an affordable unit and a new condo development. For instance, if someone's buying a triple decker and it's currently 3 apartments, to convert it to 3 condos would require like putting in different meters, different kind of costs that come with condoization. You might have to establish a condo board. So what proportion of those types of expenses, first of all, around how much does that cost? and what proportion of that would be appropriate to subsidize from our end, and also would encourage people to apply for funding. So I think that as we continue to research and kind of look at those real-world examples and also talk to people that are doing this work, that's, I think, what we'd want to explore. Is, are there major, like, cost and logistical barriers to the type of naturally occurring affordability that we want to encourage, that we need to take into account when we set up a program like this? You know, I think actually running a program like it would be fairly straightforward, where we would put out a call, like a request for proposals essentially, set a certain budget for it based on what we have, and we could set up an online application portal, put it out there through, through banks, put it out there through the developer community that's known, and through the media, and encourage that. But I do think that that's probably going to end up, even though we have to kind of tie up some of the other logistical pieces, being more feasible for us in the short term, 2025, 26, than, looking at just a cursory glance on Zillow of some of the like triple deckers that are available in Revere, even some of the ones that you'd consider to be more on the needs TLC side, you're looking at like $1 million. So I personally share Dean's passion for, like, we'd love to get into a point where we have sustainable revenue sources and stuff that's kind of producing money that comes back to us. I'm just not sure that route is going to be an option to us in the near term, but we should keep researching it. So now I'm droning too, so I think we both did our share of droning, so I want to make sure we're opening it to thoughts from others and feedback from others on this subcommittee work.
When it's available, I can share what we discussed as well in our fundraising group to kind of complement with.
Yeah. I'd say it all ties together, so feel free to,
Sure. Basically, well, I'd like to start off by identifying the folks on the committee: Joe, Layla, Lori, Tom, and myself. We met over the Zoom call, and we discussed a framework by which we can approach fundraising, because there are lots of ways to do it, and we kind of boil it down to two. There's public and private opportunities for fundraising. But specifically in the private sector, as Joe mentioned before, we talked primarily about partnerships with the CLT, this Community Land Trust, because there are limitations there are opportunities that exist when we partner with them as they are a 501c3, in that they can go out and, for example, reach out to potential sources of donors such as banks and others in the area that might be able to contribute to the funds, because what we know about housing in general, it's capital intensive. So generally the folks that we would try to reach out for in the private sector would be financial institutions, insurance and such. So one of the things we discussed was create an inventory of banks and financial institutions in the area. I've done so. It was a pretty straightforward search. There are about 150 or so banks in the Mass area, and about 50 or so that are like in the immediate area, and that have what's called cash deposits. These are banks that are governed under this Mass General Law, Chapter 10, essentially saying that if these banks have a cash deposit, then they're under this sort of this supervision. The reason why that distinction is important is because those banks generally have a community presence. They have a charitable foundation that we can appeal to working with this 501c3 or this nonprofit organization, and that's one general approach in the private sector. So essentially one way to go about it, if this all works through with partnerships, is working with a nonprofit. We would basically go out to these various different financial institutions that have these charitable wings, and then we would apply for their grants. Some of their grants are actually, they have windows. Some of them are due in May, some of them are due later, some of them are rolling, all of which are inventoried in the list that I will share with the group when we meet next. The other thing we discussed is working in the public sector, providing grant writing assistance to Tom and those folks in the area. So I'm going to open up, because there are other folks that are on the meeting, that are on the call that may contribute, but basically that's kind of what we discussed.
One of the things also we want to work is together with CHAPA. CHEPA is an organization that always work for the home ownership and for the housing. And this next week will be a special meeting, and we're planning to attend it to learn how they can help us with different issues that can help our program and our City for Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So is that step by step, looking agents and private sector to help to build it up our fund to get the final issue for the affordable housing in Rivera. So I think it's just looking at partners and the private sector and SHAPA too, and it's the beginning for the resource we try to find.
Thank you. Did you have? Okay. And then to crystallize, actually, because I also have my report out on ADUs when it comes to the homeownership side, but I'll tie everything together too, because I know we talked about some of the fundraising as well. As I mentioned, my side of it, so when I was kind of looking through banks, I was looking more at foundations. So there are some charitable foundations that have been established that do sort of infrastructure work, affordable housing work. My very cursory review and quick verdict is that, without a 501c3 structure, we're heavily disadvantaged, if not impossible, to get some of those. So it was worth kicking the tires on, but that doesn't look like a good avenue. But I think it could be a source of partnership with nonprofits or a source of partnership with the land trust. And when I say source with nonprofits, we've had various nonprofit organizations come in front of us that are interested in developing affordable housing. And so keeping kind of abreast of some of those opportunities could help them, with some of what they're unlocking. I do want to ask you, Anayo, because my initial thought was working to schedule the next subcommittee meeting for this group after Laura comes back to kind of hone in on land trust stuff. But you mentioned that you looked at some different deadlines for things that we might be eligible to apply for. Is there one that's a little bit more urgent that you want to make sure?
The one
that we-
in May, I will
Yeah.
actually have it itemized. Obviously,
Yeah.
I'll share it with you later. But basically, as I went through and produced the inventory, I checked each of these foundation groups. And as I mentioned, some have dates that are hard and fast. This one in May, I will share with you, there was like 150
Sure.
banks. I don't remember which line it
I've,
was.
I've been in those shoes. I know it's hard to keep track
But
of
then
all
there
of them.
there are some that have rolling schedules, but by and large, most of them have a fixed date. I guess it ties into their own internal fiscal calendars. So yeah, the dates are important.
Yep. Great. So we'll work on we'll have a call sooner just to make sure that we're touching base, even if it's quick. But then we'll really look to the following one is when we're going to really dive into land trust stuff. I do want to report back just when it comes to ADUs. We talked about the possibility of now that ADUs are legal statewide, and then the details of that are kind of being hammered out as to what that looks like in Revere. And I know that's something the city is working on. But once that is kind of ironed out, we'll have the opportunity to look at whether we can support ADU conversion, and that could be something that falls within our role as Affordable Housing Trust. The most built-out program like this that exists is in Boston, because Boston's kind of had this ADU law for a little while. So I'll talk a little bit about their program, and then things that maybe apply to us or things that maybe don't apply to us that we might want to make sure to do differently. So first off, they offer two different programs to support taking, I think, a 1 to 4 family and adding an ADU. One is technical assistance of up to $7,500 for the sort of design and permitting process. My initial thought is that we might not need that side of it as much. I think it's more complicated in Boston. I think some of the permitting fees and costs probably are a lot higher kind of on their side, but I might be wrong, so I want to make sure that we research that. But I know that that's the general impression, is that building in the city of Boston itself is more complicated, and that it might not require that amount of technical assistance. Where we might want to focus more on, if we kind of are trying to pick our spots, is they also have a $50,000 loan program. And so this is a zero interest loan that's repayable upon sale of the home. So it's really not expected to be money back in the door. It's support for folks that are really interested in kind of long-term having an ADU on their property that are owner occupants. So it's up to $50,000, and then some of the things that they do that they have for resources that we maybe might not have, so we have to think about it, are people that receive this are assigned a city staffer to kind of help oversight of the construction process of the ADU. We frankly wouldn't have those resources within the building department in Revere. They're already strained, over capacity on a good day. But there may be some potential in the future for like, could planning and community development have a staffer devote some time to that type of project? So it's something to think about. They also offer seminars on this ADU conversion process. Maybe we could piggyback off of theirs, maybe Mass Housing will start doing things like that because it's going to be a statewide phenomenon and not just within Boston. But I'd say that offering seminars within Revere itself, probably not going to be cost effective for the amount of projects that would happen. The other thing that I just flagged when reading their program guidelines that I'd need some clarity on for our side is that they offer the loans for residents that are up to 120% of AMI. I know that, we have guidelines around 80% AMI, what we're allowed to spend money on. What may be possible, and I'm going to try to get some clarity on this, is that if the rent is set at, the affordable rate for someone that's 80% AMI or below, for an ADU that we help subsidize or do a loan to, that would fall within our scope, even if the funding goes to, it's sort of like, if we were to subsidize a developer, they're not making under 80% of AMI, right? But it's for purposes of creating housing that falls within that income range. So those are some of the kind of unanswered questions. But I think in terms of answered questions, I think the idea of an ADU conversion loan program is something that could be really cost effective. It could really help us create affordable housing. I know that Deb was not able to make it today, but she did specifically mention that kind of getting that capital to get the projects off the ground is something that's a huge barrier to ADU construction in Boston right now, and that the loan program makes a huge difference. And so I think that's something to prioritize. I'm going to continue to put that on my plate, and I'll tag folks in to help just kind of research what that program design might look like, what a reasonable amount of money would be, and then what we could do to replace the fact that we don't have the kind of capacity to assign like a building department staffer to oversee these. Because sort of like the senior repairs, when we talked about that, one thing we want to be mindful of is, not that we would be required to, but I think that if we're offering loans to support construction projects within the city, we want to make sure that that's a licensed and reputable contractor that's doing the work, that there's oversight of the work that's done, that there's a report back that it's done, how it was supposed to be done, and that huge overrun, cost overruns are avoided. It wouldn't cost us more because the loan that we'd be giving is a fixed amount, but it defeats the purpose, right? If it ends up being a huge hit to the taxpayer, to the homeowner, that they have to pay a lot more than they thought because they got an estimate that was too low or a project that wasn't managed appropriately. So I think that's always my big fear / concern when it comes to any sort of loan program for a construction project, is we just want to make sure we want to think about what that oversight would look like. So I know Tom's not here, but one thing that is the case right now is that they're kind of a little understaffed in planning and community development, and maybe it's something to explore more when they're a little built out. There's no new Lorena, there's another staff member who's down, so maybe something to think about and keep researching, but not to fast track until we kind of know how it would be administered. So, any questions about that on the ADU piece? That all make sense to you? Yeah. But yeah, I think that I'll look into whether the technical assistance side of it would be necessary. I think that if we were to focus on one or the other, I think the loans probably make sense. But I think we have a lot of balls to kind of carry forward when we schedule the next subcommittee meetings, both in terms of kind of looking at what that subsidy might be on the home ownership side, researching some of the costs for if we were to kind of do the bigger capital expenditure. linking up with Community Land Trust, looking at some of what Anio has put together for funding opportunities, and then also looking at the ADU programs. So I think mission accomplished in terms of kind of creating these working groups and allowing them to kind of take bigger ideas and move the ball forward. So before we move to other items, just wanted to see if anyone had any further questions or comments about any of that.
Just to circle back to fundraising, like outside of writing grants, as far as like accessing like private funds, through donations, right? Like not like taking investments from private parties, but like what can we do there? Like how, like, I don't know if you guys have
Yeah.
looked into that, but like, could we, like, if we want to do this, like, grant subsidy program for the condo conversions, like, is that something we could go, set up a GoFundMe and have a $500,000 goal and like, hey, we're putting up the first 250 and like, here's why we want to do it. It's going to beautify neighborhoods and so on and so forth, like.
So I'll answer it from like a legal and a technical standpoint. Like legally, yes, we can fundraise. Folks can donate. It's sort of like the scholarship committee or other like committees that exist within the realm of, it's a city budget entity, but it's not. It's like a separate fund and people can donate and earmark funds to that fund. I think on the technical side of it is where I like that you mentioned it. I know that, like there's certain rules and regulations, and I know I used to be the chair of the scholarship committee. We couldn't take online donations because like the software that the city uses to take that in wasn't compatible or something. So I think that's changed. I think they've updated that. But I know that that's always something that we want to make sure to be mindful of. But like from a idea standpoint, that's definitely something that is legal. So I think maybe an IO, we should take that to the subcommittee, and you're already in contact with the treasurer's office, and we should get a sense of like, if people were to donate to us, can it be online? Can we create like a fundraising goal page? Probably not like a GoFundMe, but something like that. Is that allowed and is that possible? And if so, I think, I agree that if we were to do a push like that, it should come in conjunction with, like, we're doing a specific project, right? We're doing something that, we're trying to encourage naturally occurring affordable housing in Revere. We're going to expend $500,000 on it, and we'd love to raise that from people that are interested, nonprofits, individuals, businesses in the community that have an interest in supporting naturally occurring affordable housing. I think that's definitely an option for us. So let's make sure to bring that up with the treasurer's office to see like what the logistics of that would look like. And then I think that we should coordinate an effort with, once we launch one of these bigger initiatives, whether it be ADUs, or whether it be subsidizing condo conversion or something like that. Oh, I'm getting Italian here.
Yeah, Matt, that was a great idea. It didn't,
Yeah.
I never thought of using the online sources as a fundraising vehicle or a campaign. It's a great idea. I'm adding it to the list. As Joe was mentioning before, the governing framework, the legal framework of that is something that is not exactly clear to me in terms of letter of the law. I know generally those things are okay, but yeah, I will definitely, thank you for that suggestion. I'll definitely bring that up, and I will work with the treasurer, who I've been working with thus far, to get the monthly update to see what the governing framework of that is, and then absolutely we can integrate that, and that's maybe a larger or collaborative campaign. But that's a great idea. Thank you.
Put that in the notes there. Awesome, thank you. Other comments, thoughts, feedback on those subcommittees? So I am going to reach out. I want to make sure that Deb Frank is part of the next home ownership subcommittee, and she's not here, but she brings such an invaluable perspective with her, work at the bank. So I'm going to, before we schedule that next one, I'm just going to make sure that she's on an email and we set up a time. I think for our fundraising subgroup, we're all here. I'm going to suggest, we don't have to confirm this because you can all look at your calendars. But I'm going to suggest next Wednesday afternoon, unless you think we need more time. Do you think we'd be ready to? Yeah. For at noon?
As far as getting the inventory together and all of that, yeah, I can get that done by the end of the week.
So I'm going to suggest that. I'll send out for confirmation, and then I'll work with our group with Deb on a time that works for her. So I'm going to call her to do that. Okay. Great. So we're going to move forward from that unless anyone has any further questions or comments. So this is generally where we have a window for Tom to give some city updates, but he was not able to make it today, so I am not Tom. I am wearing like a shirt that Tom would wear, but I'm not Tom. So I'll do my best to provide some of the types of updates that he would provide just really quickly. So as I mentioned, the request went to the city council to transfer the properties that we had talked about out of the tax title custodians care and into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Once that's complete, we've also sent the RFPs drafts to the purchasing department for them to review and have kind of in the queue. It takes time for those to go out, but then things are moving, right? I know we've been talking about this for a while. It kind of got delayed because we had a few other things that Tom had in front of the council that took precedent, like the housing production plan that just took a lot of time to complete, and the holidays and things like that. But this is moving. So that's actually a substantive update. It went to the council and we're getting ready to get those RFPs out. So we're excited about that, and we're going to be asking everyone for their guidance and feedback when that process moves forward. As was mentioned at the last meeting, we received an additional earmark of $75,000 to support the first-time homebuyer down payment assistance program. We put out an initial press release to call for applications, and the mayor's office is going to help kind of promote that further. Applications have been light, so just keep promoting it. I'm going to send out a reminder to everyone, get that out on social media, get it to your networks. We got, the other thing that I'm going to just put on our radar is that we got a $75,000 allocation. I'm not going to ask for it today because we don't have 7 applicants yet. But once we get this out there and get some more, I'm probably going to request that we allocate an additional $5,000 to it to round it up to a clean $80,000 so that we can keep it at the $10,000 per person that we've set as the standard so far, rather than making the last one be $5,000. So. Would anyone object to that request if I brought it? Yeah, I'm not going to do it yet, but, I think for the next meeting, it might be something that makes sense. There's also, we've continued to have conversations internally with Tom and then with Elder Affairs about a senior home repairs program. I think the biggest concern that we have remains administrative, obviously. And so I think that what we're going to end up needing, and this is something that it would be great if, we don't need to discuss this now, it's something that we can discuss in private, what that would look like. For the first-time homebuyer down payment assistance, I've volunteered to be one of the screeners, and now I'm the only screener because Lorena left, of the applications, and I get notified when they come in. I carve out time, even though, it's not like my full-time job, to review those, to get in touch with applicants, et cetera. We would anticipate that a senior home repairs program would have a ton of applicants. There's just a ton of need for it and a lot of interest in it. And we'd probably need quite a bit of help, with administering the program, reviewing applications, reviewing estimates that come in, making sure they're from qualified contractors, et cetera. If that's something you might be interested in being a part of, let me know. We're not quite ready to launch on this yet, but that's one of the things that we're trying to iron out. So that continues to be a topic of conversation with the Elder Affairs Department and with myself and with Tom's office. Any questions about that? Okay. Or about the first-time home buyer, I kind of sped past that one. This is the spot for other city updates that I didn't know about, and I don't know about them, so they are not forthcoming. Any other additional late items or other items that people want to add or be sure to mention? I know that there was one from you. Yeah.
Okay, and on Tuesday, March 4, there was a meeting where Senator Salty Domenico, Senator Lydia Edwards, Representative Jessica Giannino, Representative Judy Garcia, and Representative Jeffrey Turco were present and among two topics that discussed with members of the Housing Equity Community is a group of Revere and Chelsea about the affordable housing environment adoption dollars, and it's an ad granting to to a local option for a real estate transfer fee to fund affordable housing. Among others topics, the leaders agree that it is necessary to deepen the study to the proposals for the good of the community, not just for the future tenants, it's just for the actual homeowners of the city before approval both act, pass away. So is this continue the bill? The bill is not already passed, but they will be attending, especially for the city of Revere and Chelsea, about it. So after that, they're gonna be updated, but it's just they follow up. They are pending, working for our city.
Thank you. And then the other thing, I know that you, I think, had sent an email or are going to send it, but there's an event upcoming with Chapa that might be of interest.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, Chapa will be next week on March 18. It's a meeting for the all Massachusetts. It's a special meeting about affordable housing, the inclusionary zoning. They have different topics, but the most important is working with the affordable housing. Holding will be the deadline for the budget that the Commonwealth approved for our all cities around Massachusetts. So they is open. So if you can register online on Shapa, you will be attending. So.
Yeah, so if you could just send that around that,
Yes,
to
yeah,
my
I can
email to
send it.
everybody, that'd be great. I've marked my calendar. I'm going to try to make sure to attend. Good to build those that collaboration as well. Okay, any other additional items or notes from folks? So the last thing I'll add is just some scheduling notes, and some other kind of administrative notes. So with subcommittees, I'm gonna reach out. We talked tentatively about the next meeting, and then we should also get the following one on, for after April 1, when Laura's back to talk about, the land trust. Sorry, I had a brain fart. I've been saying that so many times, and so it slipped my mind. And then I'm going to reach out to everybody about ours for homeownership. I think that, does next week work, or do you need a little bit more time to keep kind of gathering, or do you think that?
So I'm actually
Okay, so we'll look for. Yep. So we'll look at 2 weeks out for homeowner. Does that work for you, Dean? Sure. Okay. And then a note on the next regular meeting, the full meeting in April. So Claire is going to chair that one. I'm going to be out of town that week. I'll attempt to join remotely, but I don't know that I'll be able to. But she'll be there, and then, we'll have everything prepared in advance for report outs. So any questions about any of that? No? Okay, well, with that, I hope everyone enjoys the improving weather. I guess today it took a little step back, but yesterday was very nice. Appreciate all the efforts, moving things forward on both subcommittees and some of the other efforts that we're working on. And I look forward to seeing you all at the next meeting. So can I have a motion to adjourn? Second. Great. Any opposed? Seeing none? So moved.